Okay, let's set the scene. It's March 28th, 1911. A handful of military officers are gathered around, watching a test. The pistol they're looking at? A lot of people had already written it off. Too complicated, maybe too powerful, and for sure it'd be obsolete in a couple of years. What they had no idea of was that they were about to give the green light to a design that wouldn't just become a legend, it would still be in the hands of elite soldiers over a century later. You see, this isn't really just a story about a gun. It's a story about a design philosophy so right, so perfect, that it kind of achieved immortality.
But to really understand this story, we can't start on a clean, sterile testing range. No, we have to go back a few years, to the sweltering jungles of the Philippines. American soldiers were caught in this incredibly brutal fight against Moro warriors, and their standard-issue .38 caliber revolvers, well, they just weren't working. You get these chilling after-action reports, like this one, that paint a terrifying picture. Soldiers were hitting their targets, emptying their guns into charging enemies, only to be cut down because the attackers just kept coming.
And let's be crystal clear. This was not some academic exercise. This was a real-world life-or-death problem that needed a solution like yesterday. The Army was shaken. In fact, they got so desperate they started pulling old .45 caliber revolvers, we're talking old-school frontier guns, out of storage. And you know what? The bigger, heavier bullet worked. It stopped the charge. And that battlefield reality created a very, very specific demand.
This whole brutal experience basically gave birth to a concept that would dominate pistol design for the next 100 years: stopping power. The Army now knew exactly what they needed. They wanted the speed and rapid fire of a modern semi-automatic pistol, but it had to have the man-stopping punch of that old .45 round. And that simple requirement, it set the stage for one of the most intense design competitions the world had ever seen. So, by 1910, the field had been narrowed down to just two final contenders. You had a design from the Savage Arms Company and another from the absolute legend, John Moses Browning, which was being built by Colt. To decide the winner, the Army came up with a final, brutal torture test, one that was designed to literally break any weapon. What happened next wasn't just a simple test, it was the forging of a true legend. The test itself was straightforward, but just punishing. Fire 6,000 rounds through each pistol. The Savage design, it started off okay, but pretty soon the problems started stacking up. A failure to feed here, a jam there. By the time they were done, it had malfunctioned 37 times. Now think about that. That's 37 times a soldier's life could have been over in a real fight. Then it was Browning's turn. It just ate round after round. When it got too hot to even hold, they just dunked it in a bucket of water and kept on firing. So what was its final score?
0. Absolutely 0. Not one single malfunction. Through 6,000 rounds, through dirt, mud, dust, and water, John Browning's design worked flawlessly. The officers conducting the test were just stunned. It wasn't just a little bit better, it was perfect. The performance was so dominant, so absolute, there wasn't even anything left to debate.
And just like that, the very next day, the decision was made official. The U.S. Army had its pistol. The Model 1911 was born. But its real tests, its greatest challenges, were still waiting on battlefields that no one could have even imagined yet. So the M1911's first real trial by fire was World War I. And you have to picture the nightmare of trench warfare, close, brutal, and terrifying. When an enemy soldier suddenly appears just feet away from you, you need something that works right now with no questions asked. The 1911 delivered beyond anyone's wildest dreams. There's no better example of this than the incredible story of Corporal Alvin York. So he's just taken out a German machine gun nest with his rifle when he gets charged by 6 German soldiers with bayonets. His rifle is empty, he pulls his M1911, and in just a few seconds, he drops every single one of them. His own description of it is just chillingly efficient. That single action earned him the Medal of Honor, and it became this legendary testament to the pistol's raw power. Now let's fast forward to World War II. America suddenly needs millions of these pistols, way more than the gun companies can make. The solution was this absolute miracle of American industry. And here's the wild part. Who do you think was the single biggest producer of the M1911 pistol during the entire war? It wasn't Colt. It wasn't a gun company at all. It was Remington Rand, a company that made, get this, typewriters. They ended up making almost double what the original manufacturer did. Amazing. And these pistols, they went everywhere, into the hands of every kind of service member you can imagine.
For a pilot who'd been shot down, it was his last line of defense. For a Marine clearing out a bunker on a Pacific island, its stopping power was a literal lifesaver. Tank crews, paratroopers, sailors, the 1911 was the one constant, the sidearm that could be trusted no matter what hell it was put through. So after serving through World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, you'd think the story was over. But then, the unthinkable happened. The M1911 was officially retired. But this wasn't the end. Oh no, for the world's most elite soldiers, it was actually a new beginning. Yep, in 1985, the military officially adopted the Beretta M9, a 9mm pistol with more bullets in the magazine. So after 74 years of unbelievable service, the reign of the 1911 was over. On paper, it was officially a museum piece, a relic. And right here, this is where the story takes a fascinating twist. Because the guys at the absolute tip of the spear, we're talking Delta Force, Marine Force Recon, they basically just said, no thanks, we'll keep the old one. And their decision had nothing to do with nostalgia. It was all about decades of combat experience that told them the 1911 was still the better fighting tool. So what did they do? They became master gunsmiths. Marine armors would literally dig through crates to find the best World War II-era frames, some already over 40 years old, and then completely rebuild them by hand. They'd add custom match-grade barrels, modern sights, crisp triggers, turning them into precision weapons. You see, they weren't just preserving a relic, they were perfecting a timeless design for a new generation of warfare. And the ultimate proof, the final validation, came in 2012. Think about this. More than 100 years after it was born, the U.S. Marine Corps awarded a massive, multi-million-dollar contract to Colt to build brand-new, factory-fresh 1911s for its elite MARSOC operators. It was an official admission that for the toughest jobs, that 100-year-old design was still the best tool. So that brings us to the big question, right? Why? How on earth did a design from the age of steamships and biplanes stay relevant, even superior, in the age of stealth jets and drones? Well, the answer is all about the fundamental genius that John Browning engineered into it from day one. Here's the secret. The 1911's DNA is inside almost every modern pistol you can buy today. First, you've got its core operating system, that locked breech design. It's just an incredibly smart and efficient way to handle the power of the gunshot, and it's so good that pretty much every major handgun, from Glock to Sig Sauer, uses a variation of that same idea. Then there's the trigger. That crisp, short trigger pull makes it incredibly accurate. It's still the gold standard for pure precision. And finally, that heavy, all-steel frame, it soaks up recoil and is just about indestructible. These aren't just features, they're timeless principles of great engineering. I mean, just look at this timeline. You're not just looking at dates, you're looking at generations of the same family. A grandfather carrying one in the trenches of France, his son depending on it on the beaches of Iwo Jima, and his grandson crawling through the tunnels of Vietnam with one. For 111 years, some version of Browning's design was serving this country. No other sidearm in American history even comes close. And really, that's what the story of the 1911 is all about. It survived and thrived for one simple reason. It was built on a foundation of pure functional excellence. John Browning chose reliability over complexity, function over fashion. He wasn't trying to make something trendy. He was designing a tool to work perfectly in the worst places on Earth. And by doing that, he created something that became truly timeless. And that's the thought I really want to leave you with. The 1911 is this incredible reminder that real innovation isn't always about what's new. It's about what's best. It makes you wonder, in our own world of disposable technology and constant upgrades, what are we building today that's so fundamentally sound, so elegantly functional, that people will still be using it and celebrating it 100 years from now?